Well. Good morning, good afternoon, actually, and welcome to the Big Show. We are here with the Big Show, and of course, as always, we like to talk about all kinds of good things going on in the world of sports, but let me just say this, and I mean this in all sincerity. What is going on with the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers right now is very, very much, in my mind, a product of the Steelers not really doing their due diligence and kind of not having a plan. I talked about it yesterday a little bit when it comes to the idea that Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and Justin Fields and all these guys are a part of the plan. The one thing I'll say is it seems pretty clear that Justin Fields was not really their guy. Because if he was their guy, honestly, he'd have been signed. I can't believe that if Omar Khan, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, went to Justin Fields and said, listen, Justin Fields, Justin, here's the bottom line. We want you to be our guy. We're going to give you 3 years, $51 million. That's $17 million a year, $51 million. We're going to guarantee 35 of it, and you're our starter. I can't believe that we would be sitting here right now. And that because I think that honestly, Justin Fields wanted to stay here, but he wasn't going to stay here if he didn't feel like he was wanted. There's something to be said about being wanted. There's something to be said about a fit. There's something to be said about, well, do they really want me here or not? I deal in recruiting a lot, because I coach basketball. I coach AAU basketball and whatnot. The biggest thing that I always say to these kids, and I would say to Justin Fields, is go where you're wanted. And the Steelers didn't really make Justin Fields feel like he was wanted here. Because the thing is, they had the inside track to him. If they wanted him, they could have got him. At the end of the year, they say, listen, we're committed to you. We want you to be our guy. Guess what? You're going to be our guy, and this is what we're going to pay you. I guarantee you he would have taken $17 million over, 17 times 3, that's what, $51 million. I guarantee you he would have taken a package like that without much pushback if they had made it clear in, say, early February, you're our guy. But here's the thing I'm going to tell you. There's a big discussion going on right now about how much does it cost? How much is it worth to have Aaron Rodgers on your team? How much is it worth? And how much is he worth? And how much are you willing to pay him? Again, we went through this exercise yesterday with Joe Lednowski, but the question is, where do you think he fits on the scale of quarterbacks in the NFL? Starting quarterbacks right now. Guess what? Even in his state that he's in, even in the state that he's in right now, he's older and everything else. Again, looking what he did down the stretch last year, 18 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in the last 10 games. That tells me that he probably is a guy that still has something in the tank. Go through the list. Is he a top 15 quarterback? Well, if he's a top 15 quarterback, guess what? That puts him right about where, believe it or not, like looking at salaries, that puts him right down where basically Josh Allen and Matt Stafford are. And there's guys ahead of them that basically make less money. And so my point is, Aaron Rodgers, if the Steelers don't want to pay Aaron Rodgers $40 million a year, if this is the sticking point, they don't want to pay him $40 million a year, then they're kidding themselves. Because that's the going rate. $40 million would put him about 18th on the list of highest paid quarterbacks. So if this is really the sticking point, then the Steelers really don't want Aaron Rodgers. So what are they doing? What they should do is pick up the phone and call Russell Wilson and make a deal. Because $40 million for Aaron Rodgers is more than reasonable. When you really look at the fact that what the teams are paying their quarterbacks, that's what a quarterback is worth. I've heard some people say, well, you don't want to, just pay a guy because you don't want to pay a guy because other teams have made mistakes. That's wrong. It's not how you go about doing things. Honestly, it's not. How you go about doing things is this is what the market value is, and let's actually try and pay guys the market value. And so to me, if you're balking at paying $40 million a year to Aaron Rodgers, you mustn't really want him. And if you don't really want him, okay, if you don't really want him, then to me, what are we doing here? Because at the end of the day, Russell Wilson is a guy who probably wants to be with the Steelers. So that, to me, is always going to be, the question is, if you're not going to end up with Aaron Rodgers and you're not going to end up with Russell Wilson, then I don't know what your plan C is. It might actually be Mason Rudolph for a year. And I don't know that, honestly, that would be the worst thing in the world. I look at Mason Rudolph, you give him DK Metcalf, you give him George Pickens. Next thing you know, he can at least throw the ball down the field for you. I just want to know, what exactly are we looking for if we're the Steelers? If you're not going to pay Aaron Rodgers, if you're not going to pay him $40 million a year, then you're not trying to be a serious organization. Or you don't want Aaron Rodgers, which is fine. But the reality is that's what his going rate is. That's what his value is. So if you want him to be your quarterback, you better go make a deal. And if that means paying a couple extra dollars to him that you actually think maybe, in order to get the deal done, then that's what you have to do. Because the reality is, here's the other part of this that's really puzzling to me. Okay? There's a report that just came out, and basically, it's amazing to me. I think it was from the New York Post, actually, who, I don't care what you think about their political people. They've got really good sports writers. The New York Post is a really, really good sports section, by the way. I mean, I know that, the front, the what do we call it? The front page and everything else, people get worked up because it's tabloid style. One of the things about the New York Post is it's still a tabloid. And the Daily News. And guess what? You've got to sell it every day. So that's why you get all these insane headlines in the New York Post and the New York Daily News. You got to sell them on the newsstands every day still. So I'm just saying, like, when I look at it from this standpoint, it's really, really going to be important to note that the New York Post, they know what they're talking about when it comes to sports. And they reported that the Steelers have had not a single discussion with Russell Wilson about a contract since the end of the season. They've made it very, very clear that really Russell Wilson is not necessarily who they want to have as their quarterback. Almost like, he's sort of plan D. And it's just going to be, a situation of where they have to decide what they want to do. But Russell Wilson now is visiting the Browns and the Giants. I don't think there's any chance he's going to sign with either. I think he's looking for leverage with the Steelers. Now the Vikings have emerged as a possibility for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I think the Steelers in general do business the right way. They really do. I think they're run the right way. I think Omar Khan is a very smart guy. I think that, in general, they do things the right way. But But what I'll tell you is this. I think they've screwed up this quarterback situation as bad as they can. At the end of the day, if it's a couple $1 million that their problem, then you know what? If it's a couple $1 million, that's a problem, and they're not willing to pay it for a quarterback, they're not doing things the right way. They're just not. And I think the reason that I say that is because quarterback is the most important position on the field. And it has to be your priority. And everything really the Steelers have tried to do, every single thing they've tried to do, it's really on hold until they get this quarterback thing straightened out. But let's play it forward. What happens if Russell Wilson does sign somewhere else and they're still waiting on Aaron Rodgers? What are their realistic options? That's the problem they have. At this point, you look at the list now of guys that might be available. You got to go a long way down the list before you find someone that might be available. In fact, the list I'm looking at right now, well, Derek Carr was going to be available. He's not. Sam Darnold is not. Baker Mayfield obviously is not. Geno Smith is no longer available. Fields is no longer available. Daniel Jones is no longer available. I mean, the best guy we're talking about, at least according to this list I'm looking at, is a guy like Gardner Minshew. I mean, are you kidding me? I fully expect, I will say this, I fully expect no matter what happens that Mason Rudolph will be back with the Steelers. I just think that it feels like, Dejan wrote about that the other day. It feels like that's going to happen. And you bring back Mason Rudolph as your backup, you're probably in good in a good place because it means you probably got Aaron Rodgers. But if you have Mason Rudolph as your starter, now you've got to figure out something else just in case. I mean, you can do that for 1 year, but did you really go out and sign DK Metcalf if you're not going to try and win this year? It doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't make sense to me. Because to me, if you bring in DK Metcalf, even though you got him for 5 years, it tells me that you're trying to win immediately. And to me, I think if you look at it, you better get him a quarterback that can throw the ball too. I'm not, someone needs to explain to me why I'm supposed to be enamored by Joe Milton, by the way. That's the one that has puzzled me more than anything else. And he's a guy that I've had a lot of people who basically have reached out and said, this is the guy they need to go get. They need to go get Joe Milton. I mean, Joe Milton, he couldn't even beat out the guys where he was at. And I know he had a nice little career at Tennessee. I don't know. I see a guy that probably is just going to be another one of these guys that we talk about his potential for 5 years until we realize he probably is never going to live up to it. I just don't understand that people are enamored with Joe Milton. I don't. So right now we are basically it's one of these things where it's really down to waiting for Aaron Rodgers to make his decision. Because I think it's kind of interesting, but if you don't get Aaron Rodgers and you have to go back to Russell Wilson, how are you going to sell that to Russell Wilson? Actually, not to Russell Wilson because he's desperate. He wants to play here. So he's rooting for all these things to fall through. And I think he'd be the kind that would say, yeah, I'll come sign up. But it's pretty clear they don't want him. It's pretty clear they haven't wanted him. It's pretty clear he hasn't been on his, on their radar as one of their guys that they really, really want to sign. So to me, the Steelers have almost put themselves in a situation where it's Aaron Rodgers or bust. Unless they're going to surprise all of us and trade up into the top 5 and get Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. I don't know what they're going to, I don't know what they would have up their sleeves. And I know there's a lot of people that talk about how, Tomlin really likes Jackson Dart. If Jackson Dart is your starting quarterback this year, the one thing I can really assure you is that you are probably not going to continue your non-losing streak, your non-losing season streak. I just think that's just crazy to me. Now, again, I look at what they've done here and I say, although I think it's a really good organization, I have to wonder, do they know what they're doing? Or when it comes to this quarterback spot? Or have they gotten themselves in such a bad spot? Okay? Have they gotten themselves in such a bad spot that they basically are now almost sort of shell-shocked and don't really have a good plan B? That's what I would have to say is always going to be my question. It really is a good question, actually, too. And the question is, do they have a good plan C now if this falls through? Because I just don't know that they do. It doesn't seem like they do, really. And I just feel like when you look at all of these things combined, for instance, this kind of feels like a little bit of a disaster scenario if they do not get Aaron Rodgers. And again, if they lose Aaron Rodgers for, a couple of even if it's a couple of $1 million, to me, I don't know, that to me would be absolutely a disaster. And so I feel like if you're thinking about it that way, don't basically, don't basically tell me that they really know what they're doing, because I don't know that they do when it comes to this quarterback spot. And I actually am a little bit concerned that when it comes to the quarterback spot, they are going to have to basically go out and figure out a way. If they don't get Aaron Rodgers, they're going to have to figure out a way to get somebody in here who can actually play. Because I don't know that they have a good option, and I don't know that they want Russell Wilson. That's the other part of it. I don't know that they really want him. And if they don't really want him, then how is he going to work out here? That's what I would like to know. Why would you even entertain bringing him here if the offensive coordinator doesn't want him, and if the head coach doesn't want him, and if the if the rest of the team doesn't really want him? I don't know. That's all I'm telling you. It's kind of an interesting thing, but by the same token, you can't really figure out what the Steelers are doing beyond Aaron Rodgers. It feels like they've put themselves in a situation where, you know what? It's Aaron Rodgers or bust. I don't know. Again, if you're going to pay $40 million for a quarterback, I mean, that's what the going rate is. You're still not even close to paying him more than anybody else in the league. $40 million to me is a absolute steal for a starting quarterback. Because if you look at the league, there probably is, I don't know, maybe 15 guys that are better. Maybe. And if you have one of the top 15 quarterbacks, I'm just saying your passing game is probably going to be good enough that you have the ability then to go out and try and win some games, and maybe even win a playoff game, especially with DK Metcalf. But it all has to fit together. It really does. And right now, the problem that you have with Russell Wilson is this. It doesn't feel like they wanted him. Number one. And if that's the case, I'm not sure how you basically are going to be able to get him back. Number two, it kind of feels like there are other places, right, that he's going to have an opportunity. At some point, he's going to have to say, I need to sign a deal. Like, I'm not sure if it's really going to be I'm not sure if it's going to be really one of these situations where you can make it even work. Because there's even some people within the clubhouse, within the locker room, players that think he's a little bit of a goofball, that think he was a little bit aloof, that really aren't really all that great. It wasn't like he was considered like this super great teammate in the locker room. I mean, he wasn't disliked, but there were a number of people that thought he was a little too rah-rah, a little too corny, a little too almost fake, and that's not good. And I think that's really what it comes down to there. So we have to wait for Aaron Rodgers before anything else can really happen. Now, the one thing is on the defensive backfield front, they went out and signed Brandon Echols, former Jets corner. They obviously made Darius Slay official, and he's got a 1-year, fully guaranteed $10 million deal. It's pretty clear to me that your starting corners for the Steelers are going to be Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr. And then I think the other thing is it's going to be very interesting to see. But, they've actually added a few guys that give them some depth. And so it's going to be interesting who ends up in the slot, who ends up, in their nickel. You're probably going to have Joey Porter Jr. and Slay as your starters, but now you've got Corey Trice, you've got Echols, right? You've got Beanie Bishop. You've got some guys now that you can do everything in your power to make your secondary better. There is a conversation to be had. There is a conversation to be had about the fact that Slay is 34 years old, but Echols is brought not just because he's a good corner, but apparently he's a really good special teams player as well. As we know, they love special teams. The Steelers love special teams for sure. So it is kind of cool. It is kind of cool. I just feel like you had a couple of areas you had to get better, and that's one of them. You had to get better in the secondary. You had to get better in corner. You had to get better at the secondary. You had to get better at corner. They have done that. They have added some depth there. They at least have figured out that piece. They had to get better at receiver. They got obviously much better at receiver by bringing in DK Metcalf. Now, the thing I will say, it's important to remember this. Pickens is in his last year of his deal. And since he's in the last year of his deal, he's a candidate to be traded because they're probably not going to want to let him walk away for nothing. Obviously, they get a compensatory pick, but the other part of it is they have to sign him long-term if they wanted to keep him. And as I said yesterday, are they really going to pay two receivers $30 million each? Because if I'm Pickens, I'm like, well, you're giving him $30 million a year. That's what I'm getting too. And so that's the dilemma they put themselves in. So for now, their receiving core is better. If they have to trade George Pickens between now and the season, start of the season, then I don't know if they've got markedly better, but at least for now, they've filled two of the four holes that they have. They filled two of them. Receiver, corner. Now they've got defensive line and quarterback. And the bottom line is quarterback is probably the one that everybody is here waiting for. And for good reason. Here's the thing. If they get Aaron Rodgers, it will make them a better team than if they get Russell Wilson. I don't think there's any argument to be made otherwise. Aaron Rodgers makes them better than Russell Wilson. And also depends on, on who you talk to, but for the most part, I have not heard many people complain about Aaron Rodgers as a teammate. I've heard them complain about a lot of silly stuff, but never about him as a teammate. And so if he's going to be a good teammate, that's a good thing too. Honestly, you bring him in, and guess what? If he has a good camp, and he plays well early in the season, he'll have all of his teammates on board immediately. The interesting thing is Minnesota has emerged for his services. And the thing about Minnesota that's funny to me, they have J.J. McCarthy. Why draft a guy like that if you're not going to go with him? I'm wondering if the Rodgers camp is throwing Minnesota into the mix just to try and wedge some more money from the Steelers or Giants. But I know this, if I'm the Steelers, I probably would have played this a lot differently so that I could tell Aaron Rodgers, okay, here we go. This is what we're going to do. If you don't like it, too bad. But they really can't do it. They just can't. They're almost at a place where they're at the mercy of waiting here to see what happens with Aaron Rodgers, to waiting to figure it out. And I just don't know, honestly, if he's going to come this way or not. So we'll see. The other thing is, the other sort of guy that was out on the radar was Kirk Cousins. It doesn't sound like Kirk Cousins is going to be available, honestly. It's just going to be a situation of where Kirk Cousins is not available. It means that basically the Steelers are really 100% in a place where they are stuck waiting for Aaron Rodgers. Period. It's just the way it is. And I think that's the key. The key is, the Steelers have put themselves in a situation where they've got to wait. And they're at the mercy of it almost. So we'll see. I don't know exactly what that happened. Now, I love guys like this. Someone here just put this comment up here. If GP14 is a bad teammate, then AR12 is a worse teammate for being selfish. Okay, good. Donald, tell me how he's selfish. First of all, he's a quarterback who's won a Super Bowl, who's been in a Hall of Fame, who's earned the right to do whatever he wants to do. Pickens has absolutely earned the right to do nothing. Pickens has accomplished nothing in this league. You're really going to compare Pickens to Aaron Rodgers? Give me a break. Here's my biggest problem when it comes to, the discussion about Aaron Rodgers. And I mean this in all sincerity, okay? There's far too many people who can't get past their own political beliefs or whatever they think his political beliefs are. It's funny, I had a guy screaming at me on Twitter about Aaron Rodgers' political beliefs. I said, what are they? I think one time he endorsed Trump exactly. You don't like him because of the vaccine stuff. He was painted as some sort of guy because of the vaccine stuff. But for the most part, I haven't heard him talk about politics all that much. Most of what he's had to say is about vaccines and vaccinations. I think he might have dabbled in the whole, debate about boys playing girls sports or something. But for the most part, people just don't like the guy because they don't like, and it started with how he was being covered during the whole COVID nonsense and the vaccine stuff. And he lied about being vaccinated. I don't care about any of that crap. Can the guy play or can he play? Number one. Number two, guess what? Show me a quarterback that isn't a little bit aloof and isn't a little bit arrogant. I'll show you a quarterback who's a loser. Honestly. This team had Ben Roethlisberger on it for 20 years. They don't get a chair, whatever, 18 years. They don't get it. Fans of this team don't get to talk about anybody being aloof or selfish or whatever. They had Ben Roethlisberger. But guess what? Ben Roethlisberger was a winner. That's what you want from your quarterback. So please stop comparing him to Gary Pickett, George Pickens. Give me a break. Guy has accomplished absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And Donald, guess what? You can put it in caps, and it still doesn't make you right. I hate that more than anything, too. Okay, now my blood pressure's up. We'll do it again tomorrow. The game's always on at Archie's. Have a great time. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday. Get down there for all the conference tournament games. We'll have a good time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.